For some teams, a third of the season is now over. We're going to give you our 5 takeaways from week 4 of the 2024 college football season. A very entertaining weekend of college football, even going back to the Friday night games. Those were good. The Stanford-Syracuse game was really good. Illinois-Nebraska, I mean, it started there, and then lots of great games on Saturday as well. So again, we're looking kind of big picture here, giving our takeaways from week 4, and we'll start with Michigan. Michigan isn't going away. That's my first takeaway. There were some that thought that this team, this program, you come off the national championship, and this year it's terrible. They're going to be an awful team, a 7-5, 6-6 team, and they're going to go into complete rebuild mode or whatever you want to call it. I think there are a lot of people that thought that. I was kind of wondering myself. But we see Michigan get back to doing what Michigan does, playing great defense and running the football. I thought USC would win this game. I felt pretty confident. I knew that Michigan just would not have a passing game, and they didn't, but they were able to win without it. And I think the move to Alex Orji was such a smart move because it didn't really matter who was at quarterback. This team was not going to be very effective throwing the football. So you bring in a running quarterback and make it tougher for the defense to stop the run. And I think that was a great move. It worked. Still, though, Michigan, I mean, you look at this game, 3 run plays really won them this game. The 2 long touchdown runs, and then the long run to set up the game-winning touchdown there at the end. And then they also had the pick 6. So, yeah, they got like nothing out of their passing game, and were still able to win this. USC's defensive line, offensive line, I should say, just could not handle the Michigan defense. They couldn't really get a run game going, especially in the first half. A little too one-dimensional. Did get it going in the second half. The second half is really what I expected this game to look like, but Michigan had done enough. And again, that pick 6 was huge. They were able to hold on and get a big, big win. So you look at the rest of the season for Michigan, and you've got Oregon and Ohio State. Those are going to be tough. Let's say they don't win those 2 games. They could still finish 9-3 and only have 2 conference losses. 2 conference losses might still get them in the Big Ten championship. So Michigan, I think, is still in this playoff conversation, and they had to have this win yesterday, and they were able to get it. So huge win for Michigan. On the flip side for USC, again, I don't think they're quite as good as maybe we thought coming into this game, but still, this is a good football team. They were able to bounce back, show some toughness there to have a chance to get a stop there on the goal line and win this game, but couldn't quite get it done. So I don't think USC, this isn't them. Maybe USC and LSU were a little bit overrated coming out of that game. LSU has shown that I don't think they're a top 10 team. So maybe these teams are more like around the 15 to 20 range instead of maybe closer to top 10 teams. But still, these teams I think are going to be have good seasons. But Michigan, the story here. And again, they're very much alive in that Big Ten race and potentially in the college football playoff race as well. All right, let's go to my next takeaway. Tennessee is for real. How about their win over Oklahoma? So, Tennessee's offense, it's always been good with Josh Heupel there. There's no question marks there. We knew they'd be good. They've got so many weapons. Nico's a very talented quarterback who's just going to get better and better. But it's the defense. And I think I may have talked about this a couple of weeks ago on my takeaway video. That defensive line is really good. And they dominated up front in this game. That's the story. So now Tennessee's got a defense to go with an explosive offense. And I think they're real contenders in the SEC. The way their schedule sets up, I think they've got a real shot to maybe get to Atlanta or maybe sneak in the college football playoff as a 10-2 team that doesn't even go to the SEC championship. I definitely think they are in that conversation. This was a huge win. This was one of their big tests. I think that I had them preseason losing to Oklahoma, and then I think I had them lose to Georgia and maybe Alabama. So I had them going 9-3, but they passed this test over Oklahoma. And if they can take care of Arkansas, I think Tennessee's in a really, really good spot to get to the college football playoff. And again, it's different this year because they've got a defense, and it starts with that defensive line. Really impressed with them there. All right, next we go to number 3. The Big 12, it runs through Utah. And I think we saw that on a Saturday. This was a game between arguably the 2 best teams in the Big 12, and Utah's defense just, they took care of this one for them. Ran the football well. Cam Rising, even without Cam, if you told me Cam Rising wasn't going to play, there's no way I would have picked Utah to win this game. But they were able to get it done without him. A young quarterback came in there and played pretty well. Again, run game was strong, defense really good. Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman gets benched, then he comes back and almost leads the team back. This was a great game. But yeah, you just look at the big picture here for the Big 12. It's not just about this game. It's also about the fact that Kansas State went out and lost to BYU, and we're going to come back to that game in a minute. But you look at Kansas State; they figured to be one of the front runners there. Kansas is now 1-3. I think they've lost 3 games. So yeah, they don't look that great. Oklahoma State now, Utah's already beat them on the road, so it's clear that Utah is the best team in this conference, unless we see a team like BYU or Iowa State kind of surprise as we go throughout the rest of the season. But yeah, right now it looks like Big 12 definitely runs through Utah, and they are the favorites from what it looks like at this point. All right, let's go to number 4. Miami and Clemson on a collision course of the ACC. I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We've just been we've had more assurance here that this is the case in the ACC. With their play on the field, Clemson's offense has exploded. And I know NC State's not very good this year, but to do what they did back-to-back games against App State and NC State, their offense it's making big plays all over the place. Cade Klubnik looks much better. This Clemson offense now, with a really good defense, they become right there with Miami as top contenders in the ACC. Miami, they got a little bit of a fight from South Florida, but that's a good football team. And yeah, these two teams definitely look like they're at the top. Florida State finally got a win, and their defense is coming around, but they're not going to have an offense that I think can compete with these two teams. And you look at the rest, NC State's been terrible. Virginia Tech lost again. Syracuse lost to Stanford. Some people were high on them. Louisville, not overly impressive against Georgia Tech. We'll see if they can kind of get it together. But I think it's going to be, I just think these are the teams right here. And I think we could very easily see both of these teams win out the rest of the season. Miami's at 12-0, Clemson's at 11-1, or maybe Miami slips up somewhere and goes 11-1. We could see two teams playing in the ACC championship, with both teams possibly making the college football playoff. And on my last playoff prediction video that I did a couple of weeks ago, I actually had that scenario play out. I had both of these teams in the college football playoff, and I think that could be how it goes down there. But yeah, I don't see anyone else really challenging in the ACC. Maybe there's this team that's kind of sneaking around that'll come up and challenge, but it feels like it's Miami and Clemson's conference to lose at this point. Okay, final takeaway. I underrated several teams, so I'm talking about 3 teams, and I actually did a video about this, about the surprise teams. But now that we've played another week, it's clear. BYU's a good football team. Pitt's a good football team, or at least and compared to where I predicted them to be. And then Illinois. How about Illinois going on the road and beating Nebraska? What a win for them. These were just teams that I said were going to be terrible this year. I was totally wrong. I apologize to the fan bases of these teams. I said Pitt was going to be the worst team in the ACC. They are not. Pitt's been very solid so far this season. I know they played Youngstown State on Saturday, but still, they took care of business there. They're 4-0. I said that BYU would be one of the worst teams in the Big 12, and they're not. And how about that game? That was a crazy game. Have you ever seen a game go from, 6-0 Kansas State, and then all of a sudden 6-3 with the field goal, and then an explosion with defensive touchdowns, turnovers, one of the craziest punt returns I've ever seen. BYU's just it exploded. I mean, I don't know if I've ever really seen anything like that. So hats off to BYU and the way they're playing. I talked about that on the Upset Alert video. This BYU defense is good, and if they can force Kansas State to throw the football, they had a chance to pull off the upset, and that's kind of what happened here in this game. Their defense really took care of business. And then the other team's Illinois. I said Illinois is going to be the worst team in the Big Ten. So my prediction for the worst team in the Big Ten and the worst team in the ACC, and both of those teams have definitely proved me wrong. And again, I talked about Illinois. I'm always wrong on Illinois. I don't know why. I can't seem to figure out what they're going to do. But they were very impressive on Friday night against Nebraska. Luke Altmaier playing great football. Their defense playing great. That was a huge win for them. So some surprise teams so far. For the most part, I mean, if you look at 90% of the teams, they are pretty much what I expected them to be. Talked about Kansas. They've lost 3 games. Auburn's looked terrible. I didn't see that one coming. I did not expect Florida State to be great this year, but I didn't expect them to start 0-3 and their offense to be as bad as it was. So, yeah, I've missed on some teams. But overall, it's been those teams that I've underrated that have really proved me wrong. And again, I want to highlight those 3 teams: BYU, Pittsburgh, and then BYU, Pittsburgh, and Illinois. Those are the 3 teams. So those are my takeaways from week 4. Give me your takeaways down in the comments below.